My second year was the Peach Bowl against Tennessee and Reggie White, Willie Cole, all these great players. We went out and represented and won that bowl game. My junior year, playing against Iowa State and scoring 4 touchdowns. One of the records that I still hold, scoring 4 at Iowa State, nothing better than that.
What was Reggie White like in college?
Still a beast. He caused a lot of problems, but we had great linemen, man.
Welcome to the Gallery and Hurley Unfiltered podcast, Iowa Football Rewind.
Subscribe now on YouTube or your favorite podcast player to get a behind-the-scenes look that you won't find anywhere else.
This episode, we are excited to have legendary Iowa football running back, Owen Gill. Owen, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Nick.
Why don't you start by telling us about your childhood and how you got into sports?
I grew up in London, England. That's where I was born and raised until I was 16 years old. We attend primary school up until the age of 11, and then we go to what we call secondary school until you're 16. Secondary school that I went to was Beaufoy in London, an all-boys school, so I wore the uniform and was one of the top athletes there, even as a youngster. It was great competing against the older guys there. We had some great athletes there as well. That's where I made my footing as a young athlete, being a youngster and just coming up and being one of the kids, or what we call one of the lads. It was a good time.
You don't have a British accent.
No. What's funny is we'll actually be going back this summer because my mom and my sister still live there. So usually when I go back and I'm around all my friends and stuff, the accent will come back. And still there are certain words, like when I read aloud, my kids are like, "Daddy, you sound British." They always say, "You're British." So it's funny. They love it. And they love going back and seeing the culture and everything else. So it's a good time. So yeah, growing up, my mom and dad got divorced when I was about 10 years old. And just being a youngster again, my mom, myself, and I have a younger sister, 5 years younger. I was going the wrong tracks, so to speak, and getting in a little trouble. When I got done with school when I was 16, my dad had moved to the U.S. and remarried. When I was done with school, I was coming on vacation to visit my dad. When I got to Brooklyn, New York, he told me I wasn't going back. At 16 years old, I left a country with all my friends and moved to Brooklyn, New York. That's where I started the new life. Back then, as a youngster, I played rugby, which is somewhat similar to football, but without the pads. I ran track and was the all-around athlete. Whatever they wanted me to do, I could do. So I was always into sports. That was my thing. But with not dad around, I was getting into a little bit of trouble. It was probably the best thing that ever happened to me. When I got to Brooklyn, my dad was like, I had to go work with him. I think like the second day I got to Brooklyn, I started working with him for that summer. And then he said, "I'm not going back and you got to go to school here." So I re-enrolled back into school, into Tilden High School, and learned to play football. I didn't even like it at first, to tell you the honest God truth. I used to watch it on TV and I was always like, why do they have so many breaks, timeouts and this and that? Because I was always used to playing soccer and rugby and always just running forever. So I think that's where the running back skills came in, was just being familiar with rugby and playing soccer and the footwork. That was the beginning for me. I went to Tilden, played 2 years there, and then received a scholarship to the University of Iowa. Really lucky. I had never played football before, but just because of my athletic background and being able to pretty much pick up anything, I was fortunate enough for Iowa to come out and offer me a scholarship.
So at 16, you got 2 more years of U.S. high school. Did you go out for football that fall and then just start trying to figure it out? So you had 2 seasons of high school football?
As I met the guys in school, they were like, come out for football. I hesitated at first, but they, encouraged me. I said I'd go out. And they had me as a lineman at first because I was bigger than most of the kids there. I was like, no, I can run. And nobody believed me because they didn't know me. But because I pestered them so much, they gave me the opportunity to run. I scored the first time I ran, and they were like, a fluke. I did it again, and ever since then, I was a running back. Just lucky in that respect.
We just talked with Tavian Banks, and he said he played soccer in high school, and that gave him an advantage as a running back because he felt like he had a better view of the field when he could break through the line. His perception or peripheral view was much better.
Yeah, I felt the same way. The movements, the cuts, all that. It's simple because if you play soccer, you're constantly moving. You're constantly trying to find the open space to get open. So it was natural for me once I started running the ball. I played rugby, so I always had the ball in my hand. And I was used to making people miss and just being able to run. I ran track as a youngster, so I always had the speed to go along with the size.
And was track big in England as well? I know soccer is huge, right? But was track big?
Track was very big. My parents are from Guyana. When you look at Jamaica, the Caribbean countries, everybody wants to run. That was one of the biggest things. As a youngster, at probably 11 years old, I used to anchor a relay team of 16-year-olds. My dad used to sign me up for different track meets, and the older men used to gamble on who would win the races. I was always part of that with them.
But you had a racket going around track.
Yeah, absolutely. It's good times. They enjoyed it. Track was a big thing there. And I ran track when I went to high school, and I also ran track at Iowa. I was a triple jumper at Iowa. Good times there.
The triple jump's a wild event, right? You must just have to train your brain to do that kind of three-step thing. I mean, it seems so unnatural to do that kind of hop, jump, step, or whatever that looks like, right?
I was always one of those kids that if you said I couldn't do it, I was like, no, I'm going to show you that I can do it. If you said you can't jump to the top of that roof, I'd be the kid that, no, yes, I can. And so that's how I learned triple jump. I just went out and I was like, I can do it. And so I learned to do it. Then I became the New York State champ in high school. When I went to Iowa, I also broke the Iowa record when I was a freshman there as well. It's been broken since then, but at the time I was the record holder at Iowa.
And so the transition from England, was that vastly different, or was it kind of some of the same sort of themes? Talk to that a little bit.
Yeah, I think different in the sense that so many people in New York, everything was clustered, a little bit crazy for me. Even though London itself is a city, New York was just different. I think the 24 hours, everything open all the time, the hanging out. And I had a couple of cousins here as well who I became close with and close to this day. But at that time, I was just a little bit taken back because there was so much going on all the time, and I wasn't used to that. But again, the schools were fun, playing the games were fun, the rivalries were fun. Actually, the school that I went to, Tilden High School at the time, we couldn't even have crowds at the game because it was what they call a bad school. But I'm telling you, everybody that I played with was great. We had great teammates, and we just had a great time playing ball.
It's funny to think getting sent to New York City to not get in trouble, right? It feels like that's kind of the opposite of why.
My dad was the one that settled me down, and I thank them both for doing that. Even though they were divorced at the time, they both wanted the best for me. So it was a great thing that they did for me.
Yeah, that's great. And we had another Guyanese player on as well, Trevor Bowlers, not so long ago. So we've
really
Guyana's been, we were like, do we know any football players from Guyana? We have Guyana. We're like,
okay. He was born there and moved to Canada when he was 6 years old. Have you been back to Guyana to visit any other family members?
I went back to Guyana when I was about 6 years old.
Okay.
They took me back there, but I've never been back since because most of my home and where I'm born and raised is London, so that's where I go. Yeah.
Do you get back to London or England much?
I do. We go back at least every other year. My mom and my sister still live in the same flat that I grew up in. It's totally different in England, man. When I look at the flat or go back, I'm like, I was made to move to America because I'm so much bigger. I walk in my mom's flat and it's so tiny, and I'm like, this is where I grew up. We loved it. We loved every minute of it. And now we come to America and everything's large portions and big houses. It is what it is.
That's amazing. So you started having some success in football. Let's talk about your recruiting journey. What schools were after you?
Probably halfway through my senior year, I started getting noticed a little more. I was the top running back in New York City at the time. I went to Tilden High School, and then you also had Bayside, other high schools like Ronnie Harmon and those guys. Ronnie's a year younger than I am, but we were like the New York running backs there. Got my name there. I was rushing for a lot of yards, obviously, with my great line that I had. And I'll tell you about Coach Fry coming by in a few. University of Pittsburgh, North Carolina, Arizona, and a few other schools. I took a trip to Rutgers as well. A lot of schools from all over the country were interested. It was a good time.
Were those the main ones you ended up visiting and considering with Iowa?
Those were the main ones. I went out to Pittsburgh. That was with Dan Marino, Tony Dorsett, and all those guys there. I was high on their list. The Penn States, a lot of the Eastern region schools, being from New York, Syracuse, those schools out there. Yeah, but there was something about Iowa that always stuck with me. That was the first school that I received any kind of literature from. I think it was just a pamphlet. And I'm sitting in class, and I remember having the pamphlet and the black and gold. At that time, I didn't know football, but I always saw the Pittsburgh Steelers and Cowboys playing on TV. Those were the main teams that were always on TV. And it was just something about that Pittsburgh Steelers uniform. And when I was sitting, I'm like, gosh, is this the Steelers? And so it always stuck with me because it was the first one that I ever received. I was like, I definitely have to make a trip out here and see this school. That was the first one, and always loved it. When I came out on my recruiting trip, I think it was like in January, it was probably 72, 73 degrees. So it was like an Indian summer. Just so I think if it was truly cold, probably might have made a different decision. But the fact that the weather was great, the uniform, and listening to Coach Fry, at that time, Bernie Wyatt was the East Coast recruiter, fabulous. He just made me, and also we had two others that came at the same time, Devon Mitchell and Nate Greer. All of us played at high school together, but there was something about Coach Wyatt that made you feel comfortable and just made you feel good and honest. I think that was the other thing. And I was just like, okay, I'm going to take a trip out here, enjoyed myself, had a great weekend, and thought it would be a nice place for me to start a career. So that was the reason for coming to Iowa.
Bernie Wyatt keeps coming up over and over again with all the East Coast guys. Said he was very instrumental. And yeah, I think what you exactly said, just building trust, honesty, and probably being honest about the situation at Iowa, and they felt comfortable with them and felt they was really important piece to making the decision to come there.
Yeah, and I think also I received a track scholarship as well. So the opportunity of being able to do both, that was enticing to me. At that time, it was Coach Wheeler, Ted Wheeler, great coach as well. And so I definitely wanted to be able to do both sports, and they allowed me to do that.
Did you know where Iowa was when you were?
I tell you what, it was Idaho. No one knew the name. We had never heard of it before. But it was nice. And obviously now everyone knows Iowa because of all the great athletes that have come through the school and represented. But at that time, no one knew about Iowa.
Wait, so this is what year when you graduated? Had they gone to the Rose Bowl yet?
My freshman year, we went to the Rose Bowl.
Okay.
So that was 81.
Yeah.
'80, we went to the Rose Bowl and played against University of Washington. We didn't fare as well, but just the fact that we were able to play and then start realizing the success and everybody was on board. From then on, we had success.
So you were trusting the momentum the program looked like it was on, because they had two average years, maybe 4 or 5 wins each year, but it must have been something that told you that program was on the rise.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you take a recruiting trip and talk to the guys that are already there, they make you feel good and make you feel like you'll be a part of it. And again, the trust from the coaches. I knew I could play. I knew I'd have the opportunity to play. I was able to play as a freshman and all those good things. I just wanted to be a part of something new. It's easy to go somewhere where you always win, right? But being part of something new and starting a new regiment and everything else, that's something to be said for. So not just myself, but all the other players that agreed to go there, Jonathan Hayes, all these other guys, Chuck Long, we're all the same class, great teammates. And we all still talk to this day. So it's nice, really nice.
Thank you for joining and starting the legacy that you did, the products of that. We appreciate that. We love that part of it.
So good time. And again, you think about the players even before me, Bobby Stoops, Andre Tippett, all of those guys. And these are Hall of Famers now. And so it's really nice to say, yeah, I played with these guys. That's what started it. They raised me and made sure that I practiced hard and followed their lead and everything else. And hopefully that's what we did for everybody else behind us. I'll give credit to them as well.
So you said you had a Coach Fry story about recruiting earlier?
Recruiting, again, I'm Brooklyn, New York, East Flatbush, and it's a rough area, to say the least. Everybody knows about Brooklyn. So our high school was crazy, but even at that time, Coach Fry comes, he's got his boots on, and we're just New York kids. We don't know about that. We're sheepskin coats with tennies, and Coach Fry comes, and everybody's like, yo, who's that? And listening to him speak and everything else. I think something actually happened. There was a shooting where shots and different things are going on. We become a little bit oblivious to it because we know the area and things that will happen. But having Coach there, we had to protect him and make sure that he's okay. For everyone else to see Coach Fry show up at Tilden High School, it was amazing. It was like a God being sent, and just listening to his accent, even coming to my house, and my parents like, we got the Caribbean accents and everything else. And then hearing this drawn out Texas speak, it was just amazing. My parents loved him. He made a great impression, and you could feel the honesty from him that made them feel good. And it always made me feel good along with Bernie. It was just a great combination.
Did you know Ronnie Harmon was nearby? Did you know Ronnie?
I didn't know Ronnie. I just knew of Bayside High School. That was one of the top schools also in New York. They always played in the championship game as well. So I didn't know as much about football, and so I didn't follow as many teams or as many people, but I always knew about Bayside. Their name always came up as one of the top schools within New York.
I think a lot of our guys, the New York, New Jersey guys, would be like, okay, I knew another player from that area or someone else was on the team.
So good times again.
So you said 2 other guys, Nate Creer and Devon Mitchell. So did you all 3 talk about going to Iowa together, or is it independent? You all decided, or?
Nate was an All-American defensive end, but Devon was a DB with athletic ability through the roof. No one was recruiting Devon at the time, but when Coach Fry and Coach White came, they started talking about Devon. The coaches were like, we have another player that's a really good player as well. And they saw Devon play. I always say Devon he had it made. He'd sit around and not do as much as the rest of us, not because he was lazy, but He was just a great player also. And we all decided to go to Iowa. I came on my recruiting trip by myself, but we all ended up coming together, and we've been brothers for life. We talk all the time. Devon lives here in Florida now also, and Nate is a great brother of mine. His son is Nathan Shieldhouse, who's one of the coaches with the Los Angeles Rams right now. We still have that rich football history among us.
That's great. So let's go into the transition and going from Brooklyn to Iowa then. Do you have any good recruiting stories, or do you want to jump right into kind of your first year at school?
First, I'm trying to think of any great recruiting stories. I can tell you one. Going out to eat. I remember at Rutgers, it's different because we come from Caribbean families. They cook every single day. So going out to a restaurant was new to me. I remember going with my stepmom and we're at Rutgers and we're sitting there. We ordered a steak and they asked me how I want the steak. And I don't know. I didn't even know there was a way. So I looked at her and she was like, just cook, well done. Back then it was always well done. That's all I knew because we didn't go out to eat. We just cooked every single day. Unlike now, I'm not like that now either. Now we go out to eat, obviously, but that was one of the stories, not knowing what to do. That kind of started the road of going to Iowa and eating at IRP and all those places, those famous restaurants there. But I did learn before I got there what I need to do and how I wanted steak and things like that. So.
Would you settle on medium rare?
No, medium. I'm okay, a medium guy. Yeah, medium rare, I can't do that.
Too much, yeah.
Going to Iowa my first year, meeting all the guys on the team and everything else, being recruited there, just great back there. Learning as a freshman. I was on scout team for maybe a week, but I always ran hard. After a week, I was off the scout team and up there with the guys. Playing special teams as a freshman and then getting some run. I remember my first big game was probably against Northwestern as a freshman. I think I had 60 yards. Back then, I knew I could play. I knew I was ready to play. Just being brought along slowly by Coach Fry. Had some other great running backs in front of me. Phil Blacher, Eddie Phillips, J.C. Love Jordan, all those guys were there in front of me. And I think my year when I came was like myself and Trey Jackson, who was a big-time recruit out of Iowa. I just knew I could play and did everything I could so I could play early. I was lucky in that respect. A lot of the other guys got redshirted, but I was lucky enough to play as a freshman. So.
Do you remember how big you were as a freshman?
I think I went in just over 200 pounds. By my senior year, I was probably 240, 245. I think I played at around 212 earlier in my years. Learning to eat then and lifting weights and all that good stuff because we didn't do that in high school. Our school was just show up, play. We jogged to games. The whole team is running down the street with our pads on and just cheering away. But those were times that you wouldn't trade, and that's what makes it. So really good times.
And was the experience of going to college and just the load with school and all that overwhelming for you? I guess the physical part sounds like it was that you came in and played and were able to do right away, but was the rest of that really hard?
It was a true adjustment. Schoolwork, going to class, it was just an adjustment and getting used to it, and then the workouts themselves. So that part of it was just a kind of a tough adjustment at first, but it didn't take too long to get used to it. Not at all. Hanging out, having fun. And I think having great teammates, living in the dorms, we're all together. But back then was Slater and Reno. I lived in Reno. We had a good time. All the freshmen were there. Having your teammates and all of us growing together was a great experience.
Yeah, it's amazing. With all the hijinks, I'm surprised the buildings are still standing, right? It's like all the stories those buildings could tell.
I know. I used to live in that dorm right there.
It's still there. Holy cow. Yeah. Oh, the stories, John Streif used to say. Oh, the stories.
Yeah, man, that was my guy, man. I don't know how he did it, but John Street there's only one John Street. That's all I can say.
Great person, caring.
Yeah.
You could probably talk to 1,000 guys like that knew him on that level. I can't imagine what that number looks like if you added up everybody he had come in contact with.
Just amazing, an amazing person. Can't say enough about him.
And I guess maybe to change gears a little bit, the buzz around the program. So as stadiums were full and like everyone's excited, or that came with like you guys going to the Rose Bowl, or had that happened before? I was an Iowa State fan when I was younger because my uncle played there. So I didn't really get to be a Hawkeye fan until later.
At least you came on to the right side.
I got to the right side at least.
I believe stadiums were full, especially when you start winning more and more people, the buzz gets around. And we had a really good year my freshman year. The buzz was always there. I think we started something and it just steamrolled and kept on going. Every year I was there, I thought the fans and the people and everything else was always top notch.
Were your parents able to see you play?
They were. My mother in England, never. She watched video, but my stepmom and my dad in New York, yeah, they came to watch me play. My dad, even in high school, he would always come and watch me play, even just from the fence. You could look over and see him in the corner just standing there. Because, like I said, we didn't have crowds at a lot of our games, but he always made sure he knew what was going on. He was proud as ever. So he always made sure to watch and always brag about me. Yeah. He was a good dude.
That's great. I'm sure you probably would have had to explain the game to your mom too, right? You're like, why are they stopping? What's this flag? What's the safety? All these weird nuances of the game.
You know what? She didn't know but as much, but surprisingly, she always knew my position and she knew what I did, which was great. So she was getting the information from somebody. It wasn't just me that had to tell us. Whether it was my aunts, my cousins, or whoever, my mom always knew what was going on. I wish, if there was one wish that I ever had, was that she was able to watch me live. But I don't feel bad that she wasn't. Some people are like, oh, you never came to. I'm not one of those. I know she did the best that she could ever do. She was always proud, and I know that she's proud to this day because when we go back, she still has the pictures. And she's a photo album person. She'll open them up, and you just sit down and hang out with her.
That's amazing. I love that. That's great. Nice. So I guess talk to me a little bit about at Iowa. You played with a lot of great guys, a lot of great coaches. What things did you learn there that helped you through the rest of your life, through your career there at Iowa? Is there any lessons or things that you can pass on to the kids that are listening to this now? What were the positive things?
I think the first thing was learning to be a teammate and understanding that you may be the best when you come from wherever you are, but when you go to college, everyone is the best from their areas, right? So now you have to learn to adapt again. Now, what's going to make me better than those guys that are there? Because you are a little overwhelmed. Oh, so-and-so's from California, or so-and-so's from Iowa, so-and-so's from Wisconsin, wherever they're from. But you're like, they were the best where they were. So now you have to step up again and compete again. So that definitely showed me how to compete for position. And I would just say to kids, always believe in yourself. My daughter's a basketball player, and I always say to her, you don't have to score to be the scorer, but if you play defense, there's certain things that coaches will see. If you're a hard worker, you're always going to give your effort on this side of the ball or wherever it is, they will see you. So you have to find a way to stand out. For me, one of them was running, but also blocking. I knew I could block. I wasn't scared to hit anybody and those types of things. Wasn't scared to play special teams. So it's like fit in wherever you can. Whenever your number's called, be ready. Always be prepared. I was always taught to be prepared. It's helped me to succeed in life. Again, teammates from all over the place, all walks of life, and you become a leader. I was lucky enough to be voted a captain down the road. I think that's because of the way you treat people. You treat people the way you want to be treated, show respect, and don't be scared to lead. Sometimes you may have to say something they may not agree with, But if you say it in the right way, then you're respected and they understand the viewpoint you're coming from. I've always been like that, and I teach my kids that. When I listen to other parents talk about how their kids respect my kids, I'm like, okay, we've done something right. That all comes from me being taught at Iowa. It's always going to have a special place in my heart. My kids go to school, my daughter goes or whatever, but they know Iowa is first and foremost before anything. So we're good.
That's great. I guess you said you were 245 by the time you were a senior. I probably would have been scared to get hit by you. Being a running back at 245, that's impressive.
I don't know if I wanted to be there, but it just happened, man. Now it's a lot more biscuits again, and I'd like to see 245 again, believe me.
That constant eating that you had to do back then, you have to shut that off somehow, which isn't the easiest thing to do, right? Pounding calories just doesn't work for us anymore, for sure.
You guys look good, man.
Oh, I'm hiding it. I'm hiding it really well. I'd be a defensive lineman if I was playing now. I'd have my hand on the ground. So yeah, I wouldn't be able to be punting, I don't think. That's funny. So let's talk about your freshman year. Let's talk about your sophomore and junior and senior year. If you want to walk through some of that, maybe some on-field memories, good and bad, if you have some of those.
I started halfway through my sophomore year is when I got into the starting role and playing a lot more and being counted on a whole lot more. I remember some of the games, going out to Arizona, winning out there, just some of the games that in the past probably Iowa didn't fear as well. But again, like I said, because of the team aspect of everything, we all pulled together and just had great seasons. So my second year, I think, was the Peach Bowl against Tennessee, and that was Reggie White, Willie Gull, all these great players. And again, we put Iowa on the map, and we went out and represented and won that bowl game there. But so that was another season, again, of me learning, me getting better. And by my junior year, truly starting and playing against Iowa State and scoring 4 touchdowns, which I think is still one of the records that I still hold, and it's tied with a couple of others. Scoring 4 at Iowa State, nothing better than that.
That's awesome. What was Reggie White like in college?
Still a beast. He was a beast, but again, you think about the linemen that we had and the game plans. He caused a lot of problems, but we had great linemen.
I guess John will neutralize that, right?
We had great linemen, so they were able to do what they needed to do. But that was a great game. So that was one of our bowl games. Another bowl game was against University of Florida in the Gator Bowl. I had a good game there. I was actually MVP of that game. We played down here in Jacksonville. But
my dad did security for Iowa, Pat Hurley, and he said that Gator Bowl was the coldest game he's ever been a part of, even living in Iowa. So cold there.
It was freezing. And we were like, Florida, because when you hear you go into a bowl game in Florida, you light up. It's, oh, man, it's going to be sandals, shorts, T-shirts. Not at all. Practices were cold. The game was cold. But again, we did what we had to do. And I don't even think we won. I think we lost that game. That was a low-scoring game.
14-6, I think.
Yeah, something like that. But being able to play in a bowl game just showed that we were on the rise and doing the right thing at that time.
How was the workout program like off season? What did that look like? You had the weight program and conditioning. What are you guys doing?
Usually when you leave, especially being from New York, you think you're going to miss it so much. And at first I did, but then I always stayed in Iowa. I worked in Durant, Iowa. I worked with Pioneers. I drove a detasseling machine. I didn't know anything about corn, all these other things, man. I learned so much, it wasn't even funny. And I had all these little kids on the back detasseling the corn and all that good stuff.
Probably not, but I did that, in high school. I learned how to detassel. It was a terrible job.
And so I'm sitting up there, but some of those work in the morning because we'd go out at night, right? We're sitting on there and the sun's just beating down on you. And I think I killed a whole bunch of corn because there were days when the kids would be screaming, "Hey, Owen, you got to go to the right." And I was just dozing with that sun hitting me after a few nights out at the field house.
What a terrible job.
So I had that job first. And then when I moved to New York, my dad was a laborer, so he was a painter. And I told the coaches that I could paint, which I could because my dad taught me. And then I had a job and I was going around painting coaches' homes and everything else, like legit job, and had the trucks and everything else. That was my job in the summertime. I worked, man. I worked hard. So that was part of the regiment. And then Coach Bill Dervich, Coach D, yep. He had me working there and just getting stronger and getting faster. So I did all of that, had track meets during the summer as well. I was always on the move, always working out, doing track, whatever. So I was never at a standstill at any point.
Let's talk about that. How did you balance track? And did you do that all 4 years? Or as you started playing, did you keep with it?
I did. I did it for 3 years. And the only reason I stopped is because I was getting bigger. My friends on the track team would laugh because as I got bigger, I couldn't jump. Like the pit, the board alone was like 36 feet, right? That's when you start jumping. And then I just became getting bigger and bigger, and then I couldn't do it anymore. I knew it was time probably after my junior year to say, yeah, I need to give this up. But again, running track, good times. Came down to Florida at that time. I won the Florida relays in triple jump. I knew I was a good jumper. Had great times again, great track guys, anchoring the 100 and things of that nature. We just had a ball. But after my junior year, I was like, yeah, getting too big to do this anymore, and jumping on the knees and all that other stuff. So then I'd go back to winter workouts and work out with the team. So it was all good.
So the triple jump, do you think if you would have focused on that solely, you could have gone and done stuff after school? You showed up the day you got to Iowa, you broke the record. So
yeah,
it feels like you were doing well. Yeah,
I probably think at that time, I don't know if I practiced enough. Maybe if I gave 100% at it, then yeah. But I just do some practices, show up, and then go jump. Back then, who was the top guy at triple jump who was a receiver for Wisconsin, and he went on to play. Yeah, so we were good friends because we were always on the pits together. Good times there. High school I was the New York State champ in triple jump. Carl Lewis was the long jump champ. So I'd see all those guys, and you just, oh, that guy's in the Olympics. That guy's this. That guy. Right, yeah. Like, oh my goodness. Obviously they were at a different level, but to be out there with them was a good time as well. So.
Yeah, that's wild. We had Dana Hughes on who played baseball as well.
Yeah, I know Dana. We lived in Kansas City together.
He sounded like he got in a rhythm where it just was like he was always doing something that kept him out of trouble and didn't seem as taxing as it probably was. I guess maybe he's just that crazy of an athlete or that organized of a human being too.
Yeah, good time. I just feel also anymore now, right, with sports, they want to pigeonhole into one sport. And I just feel like being able to do as much as you can makes you better when it's time to do that specific sport that you want to. My daughter, she plays flag football, she's track, she's a little bit of everything. And I'm just like, yeah, I'm not going to just let her do one thing. She's good at all of them, and she has the one she likes best. But I think being an all-around athlete is the best. I think about like Cooper DeJean, for example, and watching his highlights in basketball and all that stuff. Athletes are athletes, man. They want to be able to do everything.
Today, I'd like to highlight the Damani Gibson Foundation, focusing on raising awareness of heart health. It also provides leadership and empowerment service for youth and their families. The foundation works with student ambassadors to spark important conversations about emergency preparedness, all with the goal of educating athletes in the community about sudden cardiac arrest.
We are honored to feature the Damani Gibson Foundation as they work to ensure athletes and bystanders are prepared to save lives where and when it matters most. To find out more information, find them at DamaniGibsonFoundation.org. That's DAMANIGIBSON Foundation.org.
Yeah, I think I saw an article somewhere where they said that maybe 80% of the people that were high level went on to the next levels and pro and Olympics were late bloomers. At least 3/4 of them didn't get really good in their sport till later on. They'd done other things, bounced around, and then really focused on one specific thing, and then did that. Or I guess maybe developed late too.
Yeah, and that could be the case. When I tell them that I didn't start playing football until 16, I'm like, what? Nothing at all till 16. It can happen, but if you just learn and do what you need to do. If you're an athlete, you'll figure it out, man. If it's your calling, it's your calling.
I think that's one of the great things about where we grew up. At least at that era, we could do everything. We were on every team and we went from one to the other. And you had that opportunity to try different things. You could play a lot, stay in shape, use different muscle groups, and you weren't just like, oh, I'm going to get a Tommy John surgery because I threw 100 baseballs since I've been in 8th grade every day. So I think it was a good opportunity, at least for me, to do a lot of stuff, get used to new environments and changing. Teams show up and it's not necessarily like you're going to be the same position you're even, right? They might be like, okay, here's an opening for you to do this and be able to jump in and go from a tight end to a linebacker or vice versa. I think that helps a lot. Interesting. Yeah, I have a young daughter, so I'm almost, is that opportunity going to be gone? And is it like you have to be in a certain group to go somewhere? If you're an athlete, they're going to find you.
And I agree with you. I feel like you do in a way, but a lot of it is about money as well. They want to keep you there. My mom and dad didn't have to spend money for me to go to camps and do all of this stuff. And I made it. But at the same time, you have your kid and you're like, if I don't let them do that, maybe they're going to miss out. And maybe she won't get chosen for this team or that team if I don't show up and let her show up. So it's tough. It's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, because I can see it from both sides. Sometimes you go with the flow and you're like, okay, just keep doing it and I'll support you with whatever you want to do. And I think that's important. My parents always supported me no matter what I wanted to do. I support my kids no matter what. If they say they don't want to do it, I'm okay with that. The only thing you're not allowed to do is quit halfway through, right? You got to be able to see it through. And I think that's one of the other things that was taught me. You got to see it through. One, you got teammates that are counting on you. So you can't like halfway through go, yeah, I'm not going to be there. That's like going to war, right? You got it by yourself. You can't do that. I think that's definitely the teamwork, the camaraderie definitely sticks with you. When my kids go, how are you still friends with? I'm like, I call all my friends because they're my friends. Why wouldn't I? I love my friends, man. We just always gotten along, reunions together. They come to Florida, everything else. Why would I change that? I'm good. I figure I'm blessed. My life is good. I have good people in my life. I love my friends, and that's just the way it is.
That's awesome. We ended with the Gator Bowl. You got another season, the 84 season, right? Here.
84 is my senior year, so 84 is
Freedom Bowl.
Oh, Texas.
Yeah.
We destroyed Texas. I think Chuck threw for 8 million yards or something, but we definitely represented the state of Iowa. And I think that was probably one of Coach Fry's happiest moments as well, because it was Texas, right? Him being from Texas was up here. We were the farm boys, so to speak, and to go out and destroy them like that was, you couldn't beat that, man. That was great.
That put Iowa on the map for sure, because people were shocked at the score. I think it's 55-17 or 17. Something.
Again, we were prepared. I don't know whether to say they took us lightly. I just don't think they realized what we had, because we were a good team. We had great players, and it was like, there's no way that anybody could ever take us lightly. It just couldn't happen. It was nothing was a fluke. We showed up and we played and represented. So yeah, that was one of the good ones.
How about some other memories from any of the playing years at Iowa? You mentioned Iowa State and Northwestern early on. What
Northwestern,
about...
those were probably the hardest practices were like right before a Northwestern game. Back then, Northwestern wasn't, they've had some years where they've been good with Coach Fitzgerald and doing some good things, but back then they weren't on our level. But Coach Fry didn't take anything for granted. We worked like crazy when it was time to play a team like Northwestern because anybody can beat them on any Saturday. He made sure that we were ready, that we were prepared, and we weren't going to lose those games like that. But playing Wisconsin was always tough. That seemed like another rivalry. Illinois, those were rivalries. And Michigan, man. Playing Michigan, I remember, I think we were the first team to shut Michigan out. We beat them 26-0 in a game in Iowa City. And I know that didn't sit well with them. When good comes bad, I remember at a Michigan game, I think we lost 13-10 or something. I had a fumble in the game. And you think everything's going to be good always, but things happen. You have to learn from it and come back from it. But that was a tough loss. That probably was one that stung more than any other game that I've played. Just because I thought that was partly my fault for the loss at a crucial time. But again, what are you going to do? You just got to come back from it. And hopefully I did from then and did better. It was good. I wasn't a fumbler by any means, but sometimes just at the wrong time, or what they say for them, the right time, it just happens. I know I did more good than that fumble at that time. But that one stung. That one I remember for sure.
It's so easy to hang on to those things too, right? During the game, it's devastating. It just sticks in your head until you're able to do something to equalize that part. I guess competitors are like that, right?
Missed a kick at that crucial time and things like that.
I remember all the misses.
You remember that. There's just something about it. Like Nick said, that's the competitor in you. For sure. So, yeah, after that senior year.
Did you play, I thought I read somewhere you were also fullback?
I played fullback also. There's something about smashing people, man, running full speed. Yeah, it's good, man. I loved it. It didn't bother me. What happened was I was the tailback. Ronnie was a receiver. One year, Ronnie broke his leg. I went back to fullback and blocked for him. So that was, listen, both of us in the backfield, it was fabulous, man. We're from New York. We already have that, let's go do this. And we just talk smack and go get them, man. That was a pleasure. That was fun. I truly enjoyed that as well. So being able to play two positions, again, preparation. Whenever your number's called, you got to be ready to do it. And so hopefully, I believe I was able to do that. All good.
Who else is in the backfield like your senior year?
And back then, it was like Tim Sennett, Marshall Cotton from Davenport. I don't know if you guys remember Rick Bayless, who came in and played well. Who else was there? Right after me. Before me, obviously, was Norm Granger, Glenn Bugs, Eddie Phillips. Those guys brought me along.
Norm Granger, that's who that was. I was trying to think of that name. That's who that was.
Norm? Yeah, Norm Granger. He blocked for me. Norm was my fullback at the time. And then also we had Fred Bush, another New Jersey player. So we had some good people and some good competition.
Man,
that's what made us tougher as well.
I can imagine. They got the money scholarship-wise out of you. Fullback, man, we squeezed every...
Don't tell them they still owe me some damn money.
Yeah, right? Come on.
Get a check someday, yeah.
Check.
And listen, NIL, I think I would have made a killing because I had the nickname to go with it as well. Everybody always says to me, you were before your time. But I'm happy that I was able to bring it along for other people. It all works out even in the end.
It's scary to think about having that much money when you're that age too, right? Holy cow.
Yeah.
I don't know if I could deal with that. That'd have been bad.
I know.
Good.
It's getting crazier now. I feel sorry for some of the high school guys coming out because with the portal and everything else, you lose players. Coaches are going more towards and players that are transferred. Some of the high school guys are losing out because of that. So unless you're that true 5-star, you may have a longer road to go. Hopefully they're going to develop him.
That's different for those development guys, right? That come in and contribute right away. What's that road look like now, especially with the lessening of walk-ons too, right? They lowered that number.
Yeah, absolutely. My years in Iowa, 4 years in Iowa, were the best years ever. I loved every minute of it. If I had to do it up, I'd do it right there again. That's how much fun I had in school. And it's not just ball players, but all the other people I met along the way that you still know, still talk to. There's a young lady, her name is Wendy, and I was part of her birthday celebration. They always used to sit right when we walked in the entrance, and she would always have my jersey on. And somehow we linked up with the family, and I went to her birthday. I can't remember how old she was then, just a young girl. And to this day, we still talk and still friends and everything else. So it's things like that make you feel good, right? You touch somebody and you remain friends and they still talk about you. And those are the memories that I loved. And that's why I said, if I had to do it again, I'd do it right there again. So,
what was your nickname? Baby Ball.
Yeah.
You'd have at least a T-shirt or two.
We would have made some money, man.
Should we do it now?
Probably a lot of interest. Crowd favorite.
So after Iowa, then getting drafted to
Was there a combine? Was there a combine?
Yeah, I went to the at that time, my senior year, I had an ankle injury. I still played on it, but going to the combine, I didn't run. I just did the bench, attended the combine, and then got ready for the draft. And I had no clue. I didn't grow up wanting to be a professional football player. I started learning more and more, but it wasn't my dream as a little kid. I'd be more apt to say I wanted to play soccer on one of the London clubs as a kid more than being a football player, but that was my path. When draft day, I remember just being in my apartment, my roommate, some of the other fellas like Kevin Harmon, Lloyd Kim, and I didn't know what was going to happen at all. I'm telling you the truth. And then the phone rang, and the first one was actually the Pittsburgh Steelers, and then the phone rang again, and it was Seattle, and they're like, how would you like to be a Hawk? And I was like, shit, I'd love to be a Hawk. I don't mean to cuss, but I'd love it. And watching on TV, and then to hear your name called, it's like Seattle Seahawks, I get a pick, and then they say your name, and you just like, man, there's so much weight that comes off, and you cry, and then all the fellas are jumping up and down and going crazy at the same time, and it's like, that was it. That was it. So that was one of the most memorable days for me also, being able to be selected in a great time.
I actually remember that too, because I grew up in Iowa City, and for some reason, I wasn't sure which NFL team I liked, and I ended up just the Seahawks, maybe because they were Hawks as well. And I was the only one in my school that liked Seattle. I had a helmet, the Steve Largent jersey, signed photos from Dave Craig, and it was like the first Iowa guy to go to Seattle, I think. I'm Seahawks.
Yes. Then flew out to Seattle. Good times there. But it didn't work out in Seattle. And I think one of the reasons I got drafted was they had Kurt Warner. Do you remember the running back from Penn State?
Yep.
He was like Saquon before Saquon Barkley. He was a great running back. And he had torn his knee maybe the year before. And I think they probably wanted insurance or just in case. But he came back, and then they asked me if I would again, he's a kid that doesn't really know the ins and outs of American football. And they asked me if I would go on injured reserve. And I didn't want to, I just felt like it was an insult, not knowing the game or how it's played, the business side of it.
They wanted to hide you like roster wise by going on IR?
Absolutely. Yeah. My agent asked, and I was like, no, I don't want to do that. The next day, I was in Indianapolis. Your journey's your journey, right? Things happen. I don't have no ill will or anything like that. I just personally didn't know how the business side of it worked back then. I went to Indianapolis there a few years, and then I was part of the Eric Dickerson trade back then. So I ended up going out to LA. Eric came to Indianapolis back then. And what was funny then, I had great friends on the Colts back then. And when I was going out to LA, one of my good friends, Harvey Armstrong, I remember, because he played at SMU with Eric Dickerson. And he's, oh man, I was going out to LA. And so Eric was like, when I got off the plane, he made sure I had people that were there to take care of me. And I always loved that. Just really good people. Again, the journey is what it is. Lucky enough to be there for a few years. And again, no regrets or anything like that. I can always say, yeah, I was there. One of the few. So all good.
Sorry to go backwards a little bit, but like you were a City Hawk too. So City Hawk, a Hawk, and a Seahawk. Wow, you really just you went for it.
Hawks. City Hawk. I like the logo.
Didn't get away from
cool.
it, man.
Yeah, he's all bought in. I love it.
And nice. I had a junior high, Southeast junior high Hawk list. So maybe I was just like, we're going to go with the Hawks for it.
Was there anybody that just stood out head and shoulders above everyone else?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I remember my senior year attending Jack Lambert football camp. It was like myself, Randall Cunningham, a few other players, but hanging out with Tony Dorsett and Ron Springs, those guys I idolized watching Dallas. That was great to see people like that because I always revered running backs. That was my thing. Getting to be a part of that and having pictures with them was heaven for me at that time. I did that camp with them, seeing Jack Lambert. You hear that name, and it's like that linebacker.
Pictures with the teeth missing and like
teeth
blood.
And
all that. Looked like he was a savage, right? For sure.
Yeah. So that was a great time attending that. My year as well, I played in the Hula Bowl and Japan Bowl. I was with like Doug Flutie, Refrigerator Perry, all those kinds of players. Being associated and being a part of all that, still have those good memories. Just good times, man. Just good times.
To go back to the business of the football thing, I think it's interesting because your average fan and news writer are really quick to jump on the negative part when some situation doesn't work out, right? And they don't really understand fully the backstory or what happened to that part. And they're just like, oh, this person didn't make it or was this or that. And it unfairly paints people in those pictures of like, okay, this situation just wasn't going to work out from the get-go no matter what happened. So it's interesting to hear you say that and hear you be a second round pick and then you're just like, oh, they cut me in a couple of years because they just didn't fit into what they wanted or what they were doing. And then you get that. Right? Yeah, it's no fault of your own. And you don't know. You were new to the situation, right? Yeah. It's not really fair in those terms.
They didn't say what they want to say. I know who I am and how I played and everything else. And again, it makes for a good story for them, right? Yeah, sure. I'm good. I've got big shoulders and can handle it. I always feel like people know your character and everything else, and you just move on. It just means it wasn't meant for me at that time, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah, that's a great sentiment, but I think unfairly some of these people get labeled those things, and they don't know any of the story behind it, right? Brother was the same way, right? You just went through a bunch of stuff. No one knows all the stuff that went through and what happened to those teams and the coaches. Exactly. And like, you're just, it's easy to point fingers at that, but yeah.
But you know what? The memories for me and everything else always goes back to college, man. There's just the camaraderie for college is just, there's nothing else, man. It's like you go to battle, you go to war. I know the NFL is different, right? It's just a job. You go to work. When you're a youngster, you've got older guys that are there. They've got families, so they work. They go home to their families. But when you're in college, we're all doing the same thing, right? We're all going out together. We're doing this together. We're hanging together. And I just think that teamwork, that camaraderie is so much closer. And I think that's why the friendships last longer. Because whether you make the NFL or not, that doesn't go away because you guys were in the bunker together for those years. So that's always there.
Yeah. Yeah. The forced living situation, or not forced, but like the group living situation, you just spent a lot more time depending on the teams. Like some of the NFL teams, I think, had older guys that had families and some were younger. So it depends on those pieces, but you didn't get done with work and then everyone go do the same thing. Or
right. Yeah.
And guys getting traded, moved around, getting cut off teams and stuff like that.
Yes. And so here today and then tomorrow. I remember my roommate at the time, it was a running back from Tennessee. And I remember when they knock on the door, and so-and-so come and bring your playbook. Those are the words that no one ever wants to hear when it's over, man. You just get this sinking feeling. I remember hearing that when they called him, I just laid in the bed and I'm like, not moving, because you don't want to hear your name called next. It's sad when you look back on it. I know it's business and the way it is, but when you look back on it, it really does.
I always laugh when I give my friends a hard time when they're like, oh man, I got fired from this job. And I was like, your name wasn't on TV after you got fired. At least it wasn't like on ESPN or the paper. So no one really knows. You didn't get splashed up in the whole sports section.
Crazy. Another story back then. So obviously I'm Seattle's first pick at the time. So I'm in charge of the rookies. And we got to put on a show for all these veterans. So you could sing, you could do whatever. I remember I had to stand on a chair and chug a pitcher of beer. And I did it, and they clapped, and I just walked outside and threw up all over the place. It was the craziest thing. Or like you're in the lunchroom, and reporters, everyone's there, and then you just start banging on the table, and they go, number one. Now I got to get up, go stand on the box in the corner and sing, right? The guys that I had, man, they were veterans like Kenny Easley, Jacob Green, all these guys. They were like, we don't want to hear your fight song. That's the easiest thing to do, right? Everybody knows their fight song. So because of that, they would have us up thinking about what songs you're going to sing when you know your number's going to get called. The best one was this guy, he sang Tequila. He just stood up there and he go, tequila. And that was all he did, man. And I was like, oh, why didn't I think of that? So I'm up thinking the words to these songs and making sure I can sound good. And, oh, God.
You did that refrain like 10 times in a row and
yeah.
He was good?
Tequila. And it was like, everybody was like stunned, like, what? Tequila? That's all he said. And then we had one guy that was like, no, I'm not doing it. And every time when you go on lines and you go in practice and you're going against the veterans, whenever he got up front, one of the veterans would get in front of their line. They'd just try to kill him.
That's a bad move.
Bad move.
Yeah, you're going to pay for this over and over again.
To me, it's not that. Again, I'm okay, man. If everyone's got to do it, we all do it. It's all good. It ain't that long. So I got to sing or whatever.
Buy donuts or whatever it is, yeah, right?
Yeah. You get embarrassed, but it is what it is. Doing stuff like that or having to take all the running backs out to eat and having a $1,500, $2,000 check. You gotta pay.
That was my next. I don't think those checks are that small really anymore. Those checks are like $1,000 checks, right?
Back then, I gotta make sure I got this amount in there. Now these dudes are just whatever. I figure, okay, my time now. I get the next person next year when I got it. Yeah. It all works out.
They tell stories about the guys that would just order bottles of Dom.
Yeah, they take them home and cigars and all of this, and you're like, because I've never been like in that situation. So then when the check comes and you look and you're like, what? But hey, man, you just pull that card out and pay for it. They don't care. When you're a veteran, you're just like, you're going to deal with it. All good stories.
And when you were at Seattle, where did you guys go to camp? Did you stay around there or did you go somewhere else? Seattle's like like on the lake, isn't it? It's like a beautiful.
I can't remember the name of it. It was on the lake, but it was good, man. I remember I was 240, 245. And after one day or the next day, I was down to 215. I was just sick and I couldn't eat. They had an article and it's like running back sheds, 15 pounds, 20 pounds. When I ran and I could not eat, dehydrated, everything. I never missed a day of workout. I was just like, I got to suck it up, man. But I was in serious pain. I never run like that.
Yeah.
That workout was crazy. It was crazy. I figure everybody has to go through it.
Definitely, right? What did you say, Brian?
How did everything end up? Did you decide to walk away at that point or had trouble trying to sign with teams?
Yeah, my last stop was from Seattle to Indianapolis, a few years there, then from Indianapolis to the Rams. And then when I got let go from the Rams, I tried out at Tampa Bay. Didn't work out there. And then I was like, I'll just retire. I'm good. I think because I didn't grow up and it wasn't my dream, I was okay walking away. So I walked away and started my life. Went back to Iowa and started working and moved from there to Des Moines and then Des Moines to Kansas City and Kansas City to Florida. It's been good.
It's refreshing to hear that because there's so much pressure and expectations put on those things. And it's not necessarily like the person who's involved's dream to do all that, right? It feels like you should want to do these things or will give your life into that. It's okay to quit. It's okay to walk away, just like this wasn't fun anymore, right? And then people give them a hard time for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Because people think, oh, you're there, you have, but it's okay. Honestly, I would have loved to play longer if I had the opportunity. But again, because it wasn't a dream of mine in the first place, I was okay.
Did you end up qualifying with the NFL pension program, or did you have enough years?
I did. I'm lucky enough. I still when they have meetings and so forth, I still go to those, part of the Jacksonville chapter and things like that. So yeah, lucky enough, right? It took some years. I never knew until I think my wife said something. I think you're eligible for this. And I was like, what? And you should just check into it. And I did. And they were like, oh, yeah. You don't know until you ask. I would have never have asked. If she never said anything, so it happened. I was like, no, lucky enough. I made it.
That's right. They weren't going to call you up either.
No.
Hey, Owen, we got something for you. They're like, oh, shit, we'll just keep this back here.
They had to give me all that back stuff.
Yeah,
so.
like all that annuities and all that stuff, I'm sure, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No. NFL, it's been good to me, but obviously University of Iowa first and foremost. That's probably what saved my life. Starting out as that kid, kind of looking for the right road to go to, and Iowa definitely blessed me with that. So I owe that all to the University of Iowa. Real good coaches. Coach Ferentz was our offensive line coach back then, and to see him still being around all these years later. Also on my recruiting trip, Coach Ferentz was a coach at the University of Pittsburgh. That's where I met him first. Back then, with Jackie Sherrill and that coach there. So that's where I met Coach Ferentz. It's when you look at it, it's a small tree, right? And that 7 degrees of separation or whatever they call it, someone's always associated with somebody. So, and if you're good to people, they'll bring you along. That's the way I see it.
Yeah,
always be good.
Running backs coach.
Carl Jackson.
Okay, yeah.
Coach Jackson was my running back coach. Back there, Coach Snyder, Coach Albert. And it's nice to see all of them off of that Hayden Fry tree, right? Gary
Impressive
Alvarez.
tree.
Yeah, Coach McCarney, all those guys. Crazy great coaches. They all had a hand in it. They were fabulous, man. They were good coaches. Good times.
Let's talk about what you did after school then. If you want to talk about that, and then we can.
Yeah, so after school, when I first left Iowa, I worked for Oscar Mayer, Philip Morris.
Did you drive the Wienermobile? Did you drive?
You know, I had what they call them, hot doggers or whatever. I used to order for all the Hy-Vees in Iowa. So when I had promotions, they would bring the Wienermobile. I'd have it outside the house, and all the kids in the area would come on the Wienermobile. That's funny you said that. The other great thing at that time, my mom came from England to visit. She actually got to be a part of the Wienermobile and everything else. Loved it.
Brothers at the Raiders, I was like, that was my one wish was, I want you to show up to one of the games in a Wienermobile. I was like, you come strolling in on this thing.
Yeah.
Be like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
I thought that'd be hilarious, but never happened. But
yeah,
I had hopes.
One of my buddies, Jeff Schaefer, who played baseball at Iowa, hooked me up. Ever since then, I got into sales. Then I went into pharmaceuticals in Des Moines, and then covered a few Iowa, Nebraska, some other ones, and then I got into dental implants back in 2000. I've been in dental implants since then, so it's been 25 years. I've been doing that. Moved from Kansas City to Florida, and still doing that. Getting older though, too old now.
So, I had a question about, are you tied with the University of Iowa with their dental program at all over the years, or is it?
No, I used to cover Iowa, Nebraska, Kansas, and South Dakota. So I was familiar with everything there, and University of Iowa and the docs there. But after leaving, I'll see them maybe at a show, or some of the docs will speak at some of the programs I'm at and things of that nature. But otherwise, I don't really see them. Do you know Doc Bob Mars? Have you heard that name in Iowa City? Mm-hmm. He was actually my roommate for a while when we were at school in Iowa. He's a big time doc. So yeah, but here now in Florida, help train docs how to place implants and all that good stuff. So keeps me busy, but it's been going on for a long time.
I think you're doing some nonprofit work or board work.
Yeah, so I'm also president of the Creeks Track Association team. So you can give back. I don't coach my kids anymore. I don't know if they could handle me coaching them. Some of the boys I did earlier in the years, but now I'm like, you pay money and that's what the other coaches are there for. So I let them coach. But my way of giving back is being on the boards for some of these teams and just make sure that everything's run properly to help the kids and just help them grow. So I like doing that, watching little man play flag football and basketball. And my daughter plays basketball, and they just keep us going. And I think a couple of the other Sundays, man, we had games and they were always traveling all over the place. I'm glad we were able to link up, though. Every week I'm like, babe, I can't make it, blah, blah, blah. But I'm like, no, I'm good next week for sure.
I appreciate it a lot hearing your story. I think part of that early teams that really set the tone for the program. It's been going for 40 years of success. That's really cool.
Yeah, it's fun to watch. We have a group chat with some of us Iowa players, right? We can get mad at Iowa all that we want. As soon as I hear someone else say something, then I got to get them. I could be frustrated, but no one else is allowed to do that outside of Iowa. We still support and love all that they do. We watch, even in my room here, I got my daughter when she was maybe 2 in her Iowa gear and everything else. The pictures are up, so they never go away. My heart's always with me.
Thanks, Owen, for walking us through all that. It was wonderful stories. So thanks a lot for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.